the two things I wanted to tell you about the Ahmaud Arbery case that have come up, and things are just coming up continuously. I mean, I can hardly keep up. I mean, it's a good thing. I think transparency is so key. Today, I ran into a couple of videos that showed that the Black Panthers went down, and I believe they were from out of state, and they made a presence, and they were armed, and they didn't just go to the houses. You know, they made themselves known, and I think that's actually a really, really good thing, because how long does a group of people wait, not to get more than everybody else, just to get equity and be treated like freaking citizens and real people? I think 4 centuries, 5 centuries is probably long enough. And I'm not advocating for violence, but
right.
White folks won't budge. They won't budge. They respond to nothing but, I guess, threats, or I don't know. This is so crazy. But I was kind of glad to see them do it.
Yeah, I'm always glad to see that. I'm always glad to see that. It's good to see that there's still organization around. There's actually a lot of different organizations. There's a lot of different groups and really awesome things happening all over the country. There's organized Black groups everywhere, and so the support is needed. It's really needed, and when they're able to go and collectively, show up somewhere and show support, or occupy some space, or whatever it is that they can do within the law, because it's not like they're breaking laws and things like that. So
need to make their presence known, and that they are extremely aware of what's going on. Nobody's fooling anybody, none of this gaslighting bullshit. And so it made me happy.
Yeah, it's great to see.
Yeah.
It is fantastic.
I think it's imperative that the folks that watch what I do, they need to know. They need to know exactly, the white folks need to know exactly what it's come to, and all my friends who are Black, brown, Indigenous, and African American, I mean, I want to know what they think. And the other thing was, I got wind of a video that shows, and this is very, very important, because it really, in my mind, I mean, I don't know, it shows white folks going into the construction site, to at least 2 different sets of people going in and looking at the Ahmaud Arbery construction site where all this started, and they're walking right in. I don't know if police were called on them, or what happened, or if it was before the murder or if it was after, but people just need to understand that Black people are treated differently, and that it's not right.
Yeah.
Because there was so I got it on tape, and the two kids went in, 2 little white kids, which I could totally see, and looked like maybe a man and his wife, or possibly a man and maybe his daughter. I couldn't tell. Went in. So he's not the only one, this Black man dared to enter a construction site. Everybody does it. You want to check it out. It's fun,
Right. And I believe the owner of the property, or the soon-to-be property, even he came out and was saying that no crime was committed. Well, he said that nothing was stolen, and yeah. So,
multiple times.
But we will see, as we often see, how this process goes. It's never going to be clear cut. I mean, maybe we'll get lucky this time, but even in the hypothetical scenario of getting lucky, it doesn't change the systemic structure that's there. So
to allow this to happen to begin with.
Of course. So of course we hope that these killers get, life in prison, as they should.
Right.
But, it's complex when you're dealing with a judicial system that is, built from slavery and
every single level.
Absolutely. Yeah. The laws that are written, and then it's everybody involved. So it becomes a very treacherous environment.
Well, especially in this case, it does seem to me that cover-ups have been just rampant all throughout, and this department, this Glenn County, they have just issue after issue after issue. So that's it's in the South. I mean, there are tremendous amounts of factors that, I mean, people kept quiet for months.
Yeah.
And the neighbors. I mean, how many people were silent?
Well,
that's conspiratorial. I mean, that's a conspiracy. It's like a conspiracy.
Well, it is because, yeah, it very much is. It really gives you a look, not only into white America, but it gives us it's almost like being able to have a look into the past. There's these instances where there's such horrifying behavior that we see in our community as white people, and we see how these other groups of white people can literally go and kill somebody and lynch a black person, and the fact that there's this, the whole community whererever they live in these
I was around these white guys.
Right. Yeah. But that's what it is, and that's what centuries of conditioning does to people. And that's not to, conditioning or psychological disorder, like wherever you want.
Basically, it's enculturation. It's like,
of course, and it's not. It doesn't take the complicity or the responsibility away from white people. So if generation after generation these things are passed down, it causes a psychological response. I mean, you think that it's logical, but whether it's your fault or not that you were taught this, we're still all complicit.
We treat black people and other people of color as well, absolutely with completely different standard, with a total and completely different standard. And that is how it's done at every single level. We've normalized it. So when you're born into it, you kind of, I think that's just, you take it, instead of taking it as a human construct that we've created to harm people, you take it as just natural. That's how it is. No, it's not how it is. It's how we've chosen to create it. It's how we have chosen to uphold it. White people are absolutely complicit and absolutely responsible for this. Because just because we didn't know, well, it can't be an excuse. Because if it is, then that's an excuse for everything.
Right. And
there's no culpability or responsibility.
Right. And it's just not, it's not an excuse. And so when we see a case like this, where these men, lynched this young man.
They chased him down, they hunted him down.
Yeah, and their home was miles away. They actually drove miles into a completely different area following him. So they knew, this wasn't like somewhere local where they saw something happening in front of their house. Like, they knew him before. I mean, clearly, because now all these extra videos have come out. So
did you see the video of where they were chasing, like?
Yeah, absolutely. Even that, I think, right, absolutely. And I think that, if I'm not mistaken, that was at the end. It was right before they killed him. So they had driven miles and miles away from where they live.
I did not realize that.
Yeah, there was
okay.
There was a woman.
I thought they were neighbors with his mom. I mean, close neighbors with his mom.
Yeah, I don't personally have the details as far as like the relationships that had gone on and stuff like that, but I do know that where those men live, to where the man was killed, is miles. Like, it might even be over 10 miles.
Well, because he was taking a really long jog.
Well, right. So they followed him. It was premeditated, obviously. They weren't going to let him go. And so this is a perfect example of a lot of the things that I see you talk about when you're talking about a system. And so a system is not even necessarily just laws. A system is organized behavior. And so we see, Exactly.
They
So we see.
allowed. Go ahead. Sorry. Excuse me.
Oh no, absolutely. It's allowed, and that allowing is part of that system. So we can literally see easily how white people organize around the violence that makes up our culture, and they protect it. Look how long, like you said, people stayed silent.
I mean,
So
in the
that's
entire community. I mean,
right.
it had to be in the news everywhere. It had to be. I mean,
Absolutely.
it wasn't kept secret.
We would have to obviously live locally. I don't know what the news was like during those months, but you're right.
People talk, even just to, it would spread through social media and in their area or
Absolutely.
messages. Yet everybody stayed quiet.
Hmm.
Mom, I believe, from what I've read, and I've read a ton, the mom actually was the one who was like, and that's why when you backtrack and hear all these things, they told her, yeah, this is what they told her basically, and I read this a bunch of times. Yeah, your son was caught being a burglar or burglarizing, so yeah, he got shot. That's it. Like, and she's like, okay. I mean, that's categorically completely false.
Yeah, they lied.
It's a lie, and they told her a bullshit and lie. Can you imagine having your precious child killed, and then they come and lie to you, and then what are you going to say? It's just horrible. And then passing it along, and the guy who wrote the initial report had baloney in it too. I mean, this whole thing was such a conspiracy, such a cover up.
It was. And this is how it has been happening for a long time. This is how it always works.
It's like we got a peek into 100 years ago how this would go down. I get it.
Yep, 100, 200. I mean, the scenarios weren't even that different. There was no news media necessarily the way that we have it. There were certain things that we don't have, but literally the way that the same exact violence that birthed white people as an identity, the same violence that birthed our culture and our country still exists. And so, we really come to understand that, like, this is what America is founded on. This is what America is founded on. And black bodies are the fuel of what runs America. Dead black bodies. Like, America cannot operate properly without a consistent a consistent source of black failure and black social death in order to run. Like, it cannot run without it. It's required.
Do you think, I'm sorry, did you think that that's because we need to control black bodies and we need to keep them in their place, and we say how far they can move into white space and be successful? Like, we need to control it, kind of. What is that? I mean, I just want to know.
Yes, it is that. And just by studying history and really seeing, like, real history, you understand that. I mean, like, as you said it, that's exactly what it is, and that's exactly how it is. But it's like, why? And we can understand better why.
That's what we do.
But you got to look at how everything started. You can't look at anything without looking at the history. Right. So the country, the economy, capitalism, and whiteness all came from black people, Africans, being turned into property and tortured and raped.
Yep. So
that is the foundation of everything about our culture and our identity. So, if that's the source of everything, if that's the soil, then that operating system, that plant, whatever fruits from it, is going to need the same things in order to survive. And that's why it's very hard for some people to really think that, this can just be reformed into something better. Some people think it has to be, completely destroyed, and, destroyed ideologically, not necessarily with violence. I mean, American white culture is violent. And so since it doesn't allow for anything else to exist other than violence. So you can see how black people have been pushed to have no option but to respond in violence, because there is no choice. if you're dealing with a violent culture and a violent thing that doesn't have a conscience, and that lives off of your body and your children's body and your failure,
down, making sure that you're basically
it's needed. So that's the thing.
down, you know?
This is why it is, and this is why it still is. That's how it started, and that's how it's still operating. So what's the solution? That's the whole thing. I mean, coming to the solution is the harder part, but understanding why it is that way and how it started is
Right.
it's the most honest way. It's the only way that we could really have any sort of peace in such a nightmare, is at least knowing the history, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, a lot of times I'm trying to explain to the white folks that I work with that, and I'll probably say this every time we chat, and it's simply that if you want to understand the problems, the social issues we have in America today, you absolutely must have a grasp of our real racial history, because otherwise you're coming from a totally ahistorical perspective, and that's just ignorant, pure ignorance. You don't understand how this came to be and where it came from, and so your opinion is basically kind of worthless. I hate to say it, but it's worth nothing because you don't have a grasp of how we got here. It's extremely important.
Yeah,
It really is.
absolutely.